I am extraordinarily excited that we're able to do this program. Its intention since its beginning was always to connect the people beyond the campus to our people on campus. And so we have embedded it in this course to ensure that our undergraduates get a flavor, get a taste of what it's like to do this work. Maybe you can share the kind of work that you're already doing in your community to make change and address inequalities in our everyday lives. Today, we have the honor of having Secretary Adrian Fontes here, and I'm going to do a very brief bio because he has lots to share with you. So, in 2022, Adrian Fontes was elected as Arizona's 21st Secretary of State. We can clap for that, yeah.
Thank you.
And also express a lot of gratitude. Secretary Fontes is a proud Arizona native, an honorable veteran of the U.S. Marine Corps, and the father of 3 daughters, who has spent a lifetime fighting for justice and defending our democracy, something that you've probably been hearing a lot about in the news lately. Secretary Fontes served on active duty from 1992 to 1996 and was nominated for a meritorious commission. His service to our country taught him the importance of dedication, discipline, and sacrifice to forcefully fight for the American dream. You might not know, Secretary Fontes is a Sun Devil, having earned an undergraduate degree in communication, summa cum laude, here at ASU. And after graduating law school at the University of Denver, he spent his career advocating for justice and fighting for those who are disadvantaged, first as a prosecutor with the Denver District Attorney, and then at the Maricopa County Attorney's Office. He later led the International Prosecution Unit for the Arizona Attorney General's Office. He practiced law for 15 years before running for office in 2016, a momentous year, when he was elected Maricopa County Recorder. As a recorder, Secretary Fontes revolutionized the election system by ensuring that every eligible Arizonan had the access they needed to vote. Adrian Fontes enhanced ballot tracking technology. I can tell you personally, I get texts, I get emails, I practically am getting phone calls from your office. Yes, my ballot was, accepted. Yes, it's been cleared. It's really, really kind of nice. So he enhanced the ballot tracking technology and increased process transparency, winning recognition and awards from election organizations across the country. I also know that you've also been consulting with other election officials to ensure that their systems are in great order as ours are here in Arizona. In 2020, at the height of the COVID-19 crisis and amid violent protests, Maricopa County saw record voter turnout, as well as record numbers of new voters registered for both parties. We're seeing the same thing today. Secretary Fontes later testified before Congress to inform them of threats facing election officials. He remains committed to preserving integrity in our elections, making voting easier for registered voters, and ensuring that Arizona's business community has a nonpartisan partner in the Secretary's office, and ensuring that Arizona's citizenry and everyone eligible for voting has a nonpartisan partner in the Secretary's office. That's all of us, many, many of us here today. If you're not registered to vote in Arizona, you live somewhere else, there's ways of becoming registered. And so I'm sure we're going to find out all the details and what website to go to. And with that, I will turn it over to Secretary Fontes. Let's give him a warm ASU School of Social Transformation welcome.
All right. Thank you very much, everyone. It's great to be back on a campus that has changed so incredibly much. I was an undergrad here back in the summer and into the fall of 1988, which is ancient history to many of you. I think, I don't know anybody, but some of your professors have been around at that point. And had a great time. In fact, I came here from Nogales, Arizona. How many of you are Arizona natives? Oh, fantastic. All right. How many of you are eligible, like you're 18 or over, not a felon, and a U.S. citizen? How many of you are eligible to be registered to vote and not yet registered to vote? I'm not going to ask you why, but I am going to say shame on you. Get your ish together. That is neither mindful nor demure, I'm supposed to say. So, I did come to Arizona State as an 18-year-old teenager from a town in greater Arizona Both of my parents were Sun Devils, and my family actually extends back in Arizona to a time before history, but at least as far as history is concerned, I have an ancestor that heard mass given by Father Kino in Janos, Chihuahua in 1695. So those of you that are like, my family's been here for 3 generations, that's adorable. I'm going to talk to you a little bit today about a bunch of stuff, but I want to make sure that you have a chance to have a conversation with me. So I'm going to try to keep my, and by the way, welcome to Professor Magaña's class, who I know are on Zoom right now. It's a class that I actually co-teach at this time. I was going to try to recruit you all to come into the class, but I guess you're already enrolled here. So, I mean, it's still not too late to switch if you want, because most of the internships actually come out of that class. I'm just kidding. You know, it's a little competition there. But welcome to my students in that class as well, and Professor Magaña and whoever else she's recruited to watch today. So let me just kind of lay out what I'd like to do. What I'd like to do is talk to you today about sort of the stuff that we've done in the office. And there's this underlying notion that voting is sort of the space that we're in is where we're in. And I think what a lot of people forget is a lot of the struggles and a lot of the fight and a lot of the work that people had to do in the past to get us to where we are today. And then to have the bunch of a-holes that are out there trying to stop some of you from voting and to try to make it harder for a lot of you to vote, that's really problematic. And the other thing I do want to let you know is I am a veteran of the United States Marine Corps. My vocabulary will reflect that. And so if you are sensitive to colorful language, I don't have anything to say but get over it, because this is going to be me. This is who I am. This is who folks who voted elected. And I'm not going to apologize for fighting as hard as I can to make sure that every single person who's eligible to vote actually has access to the ballot, even if it hurts some people's eggshell sensitivity. So just stick with me. You're going to have a good time. Think of questions as we go through. Think of questions that have to do with the subject matter that you're generally studying in this course, because I want to make sure that we have the conversation as we speak here today. And I do have to ask quickly, though, what is our drop dead time here? 2:45, so I've got an hour. Okay. So our class lasts a lot longer. Of course, we only meet like for 7 weeks or something. All right. So really what's important here, and I've already kind of alluded a little bit to it, is the question of polarization and the question of why it is that we are where we are and how we got there. But I think one of the important things that we have to realize is that regardless of where you stand politically, at least here, we are all Americans. And by that, I mean, we live here, we contribute to this society, we are all a part of this thing. You don't have to necessarily live in a certain neighborhood or be of a certain ilk to be considered such. Ronald Reagan once said that you can move to Japan, but you'll never become Japanese. You can move to Turkey or Germany, but just being there doesn't make you a Turk or a German. But when you come to the United States, whether voluntarily or involuntarily, or whether you were here before everybody else got here, you're an American. Because America is about ideas. It's not about blood. It's not about skin color. It's not about faith. Although we have all those things, and we should appreciate those. And I'm going to talk about elections and election administration because it is this republic and the notion of elections in the first place that distinguishes us. Because before the republic was conceived, in almost every circumstance in human history across the entirety of our experience, power was only transferred 2 ways, either by violence or heredity. That's it. And sometimes both, right? Kid kills dad, becomes king. That's both. We decided to do something different. And these were folks during the Enlightenment, when we were starting to, experience the age of reason and trying to figure out better ways to govern ourselves, better ways to do things. And one of the most important concepts that came out of that was this notion of dialogue and discourse, this notion that we could actually govern better if we have different ideas. If we come from different perspectives, we could probably do better. A lot of times you hear this idea, this phrase that diversity is our strength. And to most people, diversity is our strength. Means you have to have, oh, you got to have somebody of this skin color and that skin color and this religion and that faith and this national origin. No. Diversity is our strength speaks to the idea that we have different ideas. We have different perspectives. That may be informed by your race, your religion, your nation of origin. But when it comes to the strength of this country and diversity being our strength, what we speak to is the idea that it is the diversity of thought, the diversity of our ideas, the diversity of our perspectives that is our strength. And when you have different ideas and you still need to govern, when you have different spaces that you come from and different perspectives, and you need to make something happen, you need to do something for the body politic, for the population, you have to have decision points. You have to have moments where you're like, okay, that's the decision, let's move on. We call those elections. The decision point where we all get together, and that all has changed over the years. But when the folks who vote get together and make that collective decision together, that's what elections are about. It's not about you and your vote and how special you are because your feelings matter. It's about the contribution that as an individual you can make to the conversation. And that's one of the things that kind of bugs me about a lot of these marketing campaigns trying to get young people to vote. Like they want you guys to think you're so special. And you are. Everybody's nice. You know, I have 3 teenage daughters. They're all special in their own happy way. But when it comes to the decision point, this is a cumulative thing. This is an altogether thing. This is an us thing. It's not a you thing. And here's where the problem comes in that we're experiencing today. Some people think that only their vote ought to matter. Some people think that only their candidate ought to win. That's not how this works. And that's why that's not just un-American, it's an anti-American sentiment. And we can get into why a little bit before I run down this list of stuff. And so I will. Why is it that we are in this space? Why is it that we have the divisiveness in our nation when we've been through so much? Why do we have this polarization? Well, this time around, we actually know why. We knew why during the American Revolution, why we had our little schism with our good friends across the pond, because they were taxing us without representation. And King George was an asshole. And so we were like, out with you. And then during the Civil War, some of us realized that slavery wasn't great. And some of others of us wanted to defend it to the death. And they were defeated violently. We've had a lot of conflicts in a lot of places and spaces where we fought amongst ourselves. But we've resolved together to make things happen. This time around, however, the root of the problem isn't us. We are the tool. We are the useful idiots, and by we, I just mean a small portion of us, are the useful idiots that are being used by our adversaries to help to try to erode and destroy the faith that we have in one another, because at the end of the day, the American Republic relies on faith. You have faith that the people that are building that bridge are going to do it right. You have faith that the folks at the water treatment plant are going to make sure that there's no cooties in there that are going to give you bad diarrhea. We have faith that the air traffic controllers are going to do their job well because they're well regulated. Our civil society operates on a civic faith. We have faith that our elections are legitimate and that those people who are elected were legitimately elected, win, lose, or draw. Our foreign adversaries don't want us to have that faith, and they're doing a bang-up job destroying it. China, Iran, and Russia, 3 principal adversaries of this democracy. Not a single one of them, nor unified, can they beat us militarily. It is an impossibility to consider that either or any combination of any world powers can have a military success against this nation. It's just not possible. nor is it probable, mostly not possible also, that they can defeat us economically. The engine that we have created, including the international banking systems that we engineer, are indefeatable. And so the influence of this nation globally is the stick in their craw. But there is one way that they know they can beat us, and that is by getting us to beat ourselves. That is by causing so much strife and so much division inside of this country that our government is absolutely petrified, that we can't pass any new laws, that we can't react to international circumstances, that we can't get out there and give aid where aid is due, that we can't actually provide for our own, that suffering and strife will rise to the point where we can't actually exert any influence internationally. That's what they want. That's their goal. And we've got enough useful idiots in this country who are willing to take their lies about our elections and spread them as among ourselves, as if those are real questions emerging from inside of this nation. Ask anyone in the intelligence community who has seen these things emerge from sources that they're monitoring outside of this country. They've seen it, or in origin, they've seen it spread by folks here, and now we have an industry of grifters and liars who are gaining personal money and political influence by continuing to spread these lies because it's sexy. And it is an abjectly stupid way to be. If you think for 1 second that some random poll worker is part of a vast conspiracy to steal some political office. And you're a complete idiot if you think that the county recorder, who's actually in charge of running all of the elections in 2020, is going to set himself up to lose his own re-election bid in 2020. That was me, by the way, in case you didn't catch that. The absurdity is absolutely mind-boggling. And that's one of the things that really we got to think about when we move forward. This is why the division and the strife is being caused. This is the root cause of the injustices that we see as against certain voters, right? The notion of this course about justice, as far as this part of the world is concerned, where election administration is concerned, this is actually this is a real life conflict that we're engaged in right now with our foreign adversaries. And a lot of us are like, wow, that sounds a little conspiratorial, I guess. But everything can sound conspiratorial, right? That's why we've got Uncle What's-His-Face, who cannot imagine that a certain person didn't win the election in 2020. It's just beyond his comprehension. Reality and facts take us to where we are right now. And that is where I am right now, and that is to be very hopeful. And in spite of all of this, we've done some amazing things. So let me run through a quick laundry list of some of the things that we've done to attack this nonsense so that we can get to some of your questions before they chase me out of here. Okay. One really quick thing. I have actually, it's really interesting. I've testified before Congress a couple of times already, once before the House Committee on Administration, once before the Senate Rules Committee, I think it was, and then I'm going to actually be back testifying on September the 11th in front of the House Committee on Administration. Both times called by the chair. Once was a Democratic chair, and I'm actually the witness for the Republicans this time around. Wait till you see my testimony. It's going to be a hoot. So, by the way, for my class, I won't be in class that week, so I'll show up remotely. All right, so facing a lot of these challenges, particularly in the misinformation, disinformation campaign space, we really faced a lot of the outdated systems that we had at the Maricopa County Recorder's office and at the Secretary of State's office. I inherited a couple of really poorly funded and poorly administered offices, but what we did was expand our operations at McTech, and we completely redesigned the system. In fact, in the 4 years that I was the Maricopa County Recorder, we added in this county alone 500,000 new voters. And for those of you who don't know, Maricopa County, Arizona is the second largest voting jurisdiction in the United States of America, behind only Los Angeles County. It's an enormous office. And I had the privilege of inheriting it. I didn't inherit it. The voters gave it to me from an administrator who had been there for 28 years. Helen Purcell, my predecessor, ran for that office first in 1988. And not until 2016 did she have a Democrat run against her. I was the first one. And I also happened to be the first Latino elected countywide in Maricopa County since incorporation in 1871. That was fun. You should have seen when I walked into the clerk's office. They're like, what is that? So we wanted to make sure we had greater access and so that everybody had their voice heard. Some of the technological advances that we put into place were award-winning. In fact, I'm one of the few election administrators in the country who, under my administration, have won more than one Cleary Award. This is a competitive clearinghouse award from the Elections Assistance Commission at the federal level. Usually it's about 1,000 submissions, and there's usually about 6 winners. I won one at the county recorder's office and one at the state. For election nerds, that means something. For you guys, don't care. But I just figured, you know, I get a chance to brag every once in a while. One of the things that we also created with that check-in system was the capacity to reduce significantly the number of provisional ballots that were being issued. Back in the day, if you voted outside of your precinct, we also changed that. If you voted outside of your precinct, your ballot wouldn't count. None of the ballot would count, even if you were eligible for a lot of the races on that ballot. And by doing what we did, we created vote centers where any voter could vote anywhere in the county. And so you were never out of your precinct because you got the ballot that pertained to you. So if you were voting in Wickenburg, but your address was in Gilbert, you guys know where Wickenburg and Gilbert are, right? I'm just kind of like, you'd actually get the right ballot and it would count. So that was pretty important. We saw a significant dive in those. And that would have made a big difference in 2016. Christine Jones and Andy Biggs, Republican primary for U.S. Congress in that seat. Andy Biggs still has that seat, very safe Republican seat, would have probably been Christine Jones since then. I think the difference was 216 votes. Maybe actually, I think the difference was significantly less, but there were 216 out of precinct voters in that case. Out of precinct, that doesn't mean that they weren't eligible for that race. Probably a good chance that could have changed the race. We created a ballot tracking system, which was discussed. And this is where, if you get your ballot by mail, by the way, of those of you who registered to vote, how many of you get your ballot by mail? A good chunk of you. Did you know that we have a system where you can sign up to get an email or a text message that tells you 60 days before the election that your ballot's being prepared? 27 days before the election, it pushes a message to you, your ballot's been mailed, so you know to look for it. And then once you mail it back, it sends you another text message that says, we got your ballot back. Then we got your signature verification and send it for tabulation, right? Pushing information to voters to make sure that we can continue to build trust in our systems. So ballot tracks started in Maricopa County. I took it down to Pima County when I was the chief deputy recorder in there, when the voters decided to unemploy me for a little time. And then when I came back into elected office, we now have it in all 15 counties in Arizona. We put that together in the secretary's office. I'm real proud of that. So all voters in the state can have that service now. And for a lot of voters in greater Arizona, one of the biggest problems we have is there's no internet access. So that system of checking in is based on the internet, right? It's just voter reg information. It doesn't have anything to do with ballots. It's just checking in to get you the right ballot style. That isn't available in on a lot of reservation land because it's just too remote. In a lot of very rural communities, it's too far away from the internet. So even though he and I disagree on what the citizenship requirements are in Arizona, we used Mr. Elon Musk's Starlink system, and we've now connected many of these very rural jurisdictions so that voters in far off places in the Cayenta neighborhood, down in the where the flooding was very recently in the Grand Canyon, in Supai Village, these places that didn't have the connectivity now have that connectivity, so those voters can make sure that their votes are counting. So all of the things that we've been doing have been to advance a lot of these things. One of the things that we've also done is taken very close notice of the impact that artificial intelligence and generative AI are going to have on our elections. Many of us know that President Biden's voice was deepfaked back in, I think it was New Hampshire during the primaries earlier in the spring, telling voters, save your vote for November. Hey, this is Joe Biden, blah, blah, blah. I'm sorry, that was my Bill Clinton voice. You know, whatever, old white guys, they all sound the same. You know, telling people, don't save your vote for November. That's voter suppression. It's blatant voter suppression. And so they figured out how to do it. Well, we have been training election officials, not just in Arizona, starting in December of 2023, but we've been training members of the media, state media, local here, and national media. We had a tabletop exercise here in Phoenix, actually in Mesa, and law enforcement agencies, how to interact when these sorts of things pop. Right, so that it's not new to them. Because if you've seen a deep fake, which you guys probably have seen, and you've seen, you know, the one where Kamala Harris and Donald Trump are dancing together and all that fun stuff, it's if you're an election official, that might not be something that you see all the time. So we tried to figure out best practices and how to deal with these things when they pop up. And to that end, I've also created an advisory committee in regards to AI. And on that advisory committee, we've got some significant expertise, including competitors who are on my committee. We've got folks from OpenAI. We've got folks from Meta. We've got folks from Microsoft. We've got folks for the Institute for the Future. We've got some folks who dial in from overseas in the middle of the night for them to participate on this committee. All of it is geared to help us build a report that will come out early next year about the impact of AI, both positive and negative, on election administration that we can share out into the world. And it's critically important that we stretch beyond what we typically know and try to innovate and try to bring in new ideas. The best part about those meetings, by the way, is a round robin that we do at the beginning. It lasts about 45 minutes, and we give every member of the committee a few minutes. Well, you've been in on those meetings, right? We give every member of the committee a few minutes to talk about what is new in the world of AI since the last meeting. And I will tell you, when you've got some of the highest, like globally, the highest level experts that exist, the thinkers in this area, in the room at the same time chatting about these things, it's absolutely fascinating. Like, my brain hurts after every one of these meetings. It's really, really good stuff. So one of the things that I mentioned earlier was this notion that it isn't you and your vote, it's us and our votes to make the decisions. And that's one of the reasons why I think this is really a collective effort. You know, whenever you say collective in America, some people get their back up and they're like, you're a communist. Well, you know, talk to me about barn raisings, right? Talk to me about the county fair. Talk to me about a baseball team where everybody gets together and expends their resources in a uniformed way, united for a common cause, right? We don't exist on an island. Not a single one of us does. And if that's the attitude that we're going to have, then, you know, we might as well be living in anarchy. Like, go to the Horn of Africa if you want to do that. They don't have any government over there. You'll be fine. I'm sure you'll be just fine. We also want to make sure that we are engaging all communities. One of the critical components of my administration, both at the county and now at the Secretary of State's office, is to make sure that our community outreach people do the right thing and reach out to the communities. But we don't just reach out to the communities and tell them what we think they need to know. We reach out to communities in a way that empowers those communities to tell us what they think we need to know. And the formula is such. I'll give it to you on a county space, because in the state space, it's just a little bit different. If I wanted to reach out to the African-American community at the community-based level, one of the things that we did was we reached out to clergy at some Black churches. And there's several associations of these clergy around the valley, around Maricopa County. And we didn't ask them to come to McTech. We asked a small group of them, find us one of your houses of worship. Find us an evening where you can gather as many of your folks in your communities as possible. We will show up as your guest, and we will listen to you. Instead of telling them what we thought, we listened to what they thought, because that empowers communities. And then we followed up, and then we talked to folks, and we understood a lot of what people needed us to understand, because we listened. That's what public service is supposed to be about. Yes, leadership matters, Yes, leaders are supposed to present a vision and help move the whole team forward, but where the hell is that going to come from? Like my back pocket? No, it comes from the folks who are being led. The best leaders listen. Unless they're giving a lecture in front of 100 people, then you get to listen for a minute. And it was really, really important because one of the things that we figured out was that the communities out there really wanted to be empowered. They wanted to do it themselves. And so from that grew the Deputy Registrar program. And in the Secretary of State's office, from that grew the unique URL program. You can contact our community outreach folks if you are part of a group, and I don't care if it's a political group on the right or the left, whatever, if it's a religious group, house of worship, if it's like your yoga class, I don't really care. If you guys want a unique URL, you can be empowered not only to register voters through that URL, because online voter registration, did you guys know Arizona was the first state to have online voter registration? We've actually innovated in so many areas of elections administration in the state. People just don't get it. It's really kind of awesome. We'll give you a unique URL through which your voters will register, then give you the data back so that you can track them. You can follow up with them. You can encourage them to continue on through the process and actually cast their ballots. You get empowered to do the work of your democracy in your communities. That is kind of the power of our community and empowering folks to make these things happen on their own and within themselves. So there's a couple of things that I'd like to say to end here before we get to the Q&A, and we're probably going to have about half an hour to do the Q&A, which I think is great. And I really hope you guys have started thinking about some questions. And by the way, because this is an academic setting, I am absolutely happy to answer any questions you guys have, whether they are about my musical choices, whether they're about politics, whether it's about the 6 endless days and nights that I just spent in Chicago at the DNC, which was exhausting, anything, right? Election stuff, justice stuff. You want me to yell at you? I'll do that happily. If that's not clear by now, I don't know what will be. 2 things. First, register. But because you're students, and because some of you have certain financial aid obligations, some of you may be here from out of state, and you might meet residency requirements. But some of your financial aid might depend on you being a resident of somewhere else. Check. Don't just register to vote willy-nilly. I don't want you registering to vote here if you're going to lose your scholarship, if you're going to lose your financial aid. That would break my heart if you had to leave just because you wanted to vote here. I'm glad you want to vote here, but please check, okay? Also, proof of citizenship is required by Arizona law. So, if you are going to register to vote, please make sure that somebody emails you or text messages you of a picture of your birth certificate, some sort of documentation that you actually are a United States citizen. And then when you register, send that off to the registrar of voters, get a copy of it at Kinko's. They still do paper in this place, right? Every once in a while. Send it in with your voter registration form, or when you're voting, registering online, make that happen especially. The last day to register to vote in Arizona is 29 days before the election. 29 days before this upcoming election is what date? Close. Midnight on October 7th. October 7th. Early ballots go out at what time? What day? We have 27 days of early voting. 29 days before is voter registration. 27 days the ballots go out. What day would that be? October 9th. Yes, math. Here's my last pitch. So first register. By the way, never go on a date with anyone who's not registered to vote. Unless they're somehow ineligible, right? If they've got a good reason, okay. Don't ever do that. I tell this to my daughters. I've got a sophomore at NAU, a senior at one of the high schools here, and a freshman. My 3 girls. And I'm not one of those dads with like a shotgun in the corner. I'm old-fashioned, but I'm not stupid, okay? If the people that you're engaged with in your community and your friends and stuff don't care enough to register to vote, like her, No, I'm just kidding. I'm totally kidding. I'm picking on you right now. I know I'm bullying you a little bit. Sorry. Are they going to care about you? Make it a social obligation to be registered, to be empowered. If voters between the ages of 18 and 30 voted in the same proportion than voters over 65, y'all would run the table. You would set the agenda as it pertains to the environment. You would set the agenda as it pertained to reproductive rights. You would set the agenda as it pertained to ethics rules in our courts. You would be setting the agenda if y'all would vote. And I know if you're sitting in this class, the likelihood is that you do vote. But if you don't, shame on you. Because you're letting somebody else use that influence. All right, last pitch before we go to questions. A lot of people are concerned with shenanigans that might happen on or near Election Day. A lot of people are concerned with violence at the polls, long lines, and that concern is real. And that concern may be exacerbated by the fact that this year in Maricopa County and 6 other counties in Arizona, the ballot is going to be 2 cards, 2 pages long. I know, right? Like one 20-inch page wasn't enough. They're going to do 2 of them this time. Why? Because the legislature is full of dum-dums who just want to bypass the governor and throw everything on the ballot. That's one reason why. I shouldn't say full of. Some of them are not dum-dums. Some of them. How do we resolve this problem and get the best turnout so that we can have not political victories, but little p political victories? Not partisan victories, but American victories. Large turnouts means that we have the best representation of the voice of as many people as possible. That is the genuine voice of the American electorate, particularly here in Arizona. A large voter turnout should be the goal. The largest voter turnout should be the goal, without making it mandatory, because that's Australian. That's just silly, in my view. How do we do this? How do you do this? Well, I'm going to announce here. I'm going to announce it out there in the public later. I'm going to announce here a challenge that I'm going to be issuing. I'm temporarily going to shift to my political hat for a second here and take off my official hat. For Democratic legislative districts, we're going to set a time period from 27 days out until a certain day after that, probably a week. And we're going to see what percentage of their PCs vote within that time period. And which LD has the highest percentage, I'm going to throw them a party. Because we need you to vote early. We need everyone to vote early. If you are waiting until Election Day because I want to be with people in my community, or I'm sentimental and it's a tradition. First of all, none of you are old enough to be sentimental, and none of you are old enough to have those kinds of traditions, so get over that. Second, if you want to be with members of your community, go to church, go to Alcoholics Anonymous, go bowling, I don't know. But it's important that you vote early this time around for a variety of reasons, not the least of which is you get to block the knock. Does anybody know what that means? Political campaigns and activists, candidate campaigns, issue campaigns. What do they do to your house? What do they do to your door? Hi, is Joe Blow here? No, Joe Blow is not here. Have you voted yet? No, I haven't voted yet. A week later. Hi, is Joe Blow here? No. Where do you think they get the list of where Joe Blow lives?
Voter registration.
Voter registration rolls from the county, right? Why are they knocking on Joe Blow's door? Well, because he's registered and he hasn't voted yet. But guess what? Every time they do this, they're putting out some of this. They're putting out money. Do you think they want to waste money on people who've already voted? Do you think they'd rather chase people who have not voted? So block the knock. Vote early. Stop the phone calls. Stop the door knocks. Keep those people that maybe you support from spending money on you because I want to vote on Election Day. because I feel good when I talk to those folks. You want to be around on election day? Become a poll worker. Get out there and be with your community, knowing that you've already voted weeks ahead of time. It's a big deal. It saves resources. It helps the system overall. And it really, really does help you avoid sort of the anxiety at the last minute. And think about this. You think lines were long when things were screwed up. This time around, things are not going to be screwed up. But how about your friend, the old lady from down the street that's going to have to manage 2 pages worth of ballot while she's sitting in the ballot box on in that booth on election day? You want to stand in that line? I don't. So I'm going to be voting on October 9th. I'm going to be voting on the first day that it's eligible for me to vote. I'm going to go down to the county recorder's office, down to the election department. I'm going to show them my ID. I'm going to say, I'm here to vote. And they're going to say, you're a little early and we already mailed you your ballot. I'm like, thank you for mailing my ballot. I want to vote today. And they're going to say, okay. And they're going to give me my ballot and I'm going to vote. And I encourage you to do the same. Not at the same time as me, please. I don't like standing in line, but at least on the same day. Make that happen. That's my pitch, and those are the reasons for it. And very last, before we get to questions, I sort of alluded to this earlier. Actually, I was pretty straightforward about it. Democracy is the opposite of conformity of views. It is the exact opposite. If we have disconformity in views, we must nonetheless yet govern. We must make decisions and determinations about how to expend our common resources, about how to act and interact with districts and nations and states adjacent to us or on the other side of the planet. We have to make decisions. Conformity is the opposite of democracy. And where people are absolutely insisting that it's either my way or the highway, they just don't get it. We're supposed to disagree. And we should try to do it without being disagreeable. Sometimes, if you get really angry, yeah, talk it up a little bit. Hopefully, people won't get their feelings hurt too much. All right, it is 18 after the hour, which means we've got just under half an hour for Q&A. I suspect that there are a lot of them. I've got this fine young gentleman right here with a microphone in his hand, ready to run about the place.
I can't
So
believe you
stick
called
your
me
hand in the
young.
air.
That's always a compliment right
There
there.
we go, right next to you.
Secretary Fontes, so real quick, we have a question from one of our online audience members.
Is that
not
one of my
yet to the in-person.
students?
I do not know if that's the case. We just see it here. It says some of the online students have been getting text messages offering money to remind your friends to vote. I'm not sure if the in-person students are getting these messages as well. They say they're coming from a company that's Flight Desk. And they say that they got numbers from a FOIA request to ASU. Is this kind of thing normal, and is it even legal?
I don't know if it's normal. I've never heard of it before, so I'd have to say in my experience that is not normal. Is it legal? I mean, I'm a lawyer and I do a lot of election law stuff, but because I'm the Secretary of State, I'm not going to render a legal opinion. I'll leave that to counsel. That is an excellent question. My Deputy General Counsel is sitting here in the front row. I think we'll write that down and get that answer back to you, unless he can figure it out before the end of the hour. Thank you for that question. That's a great question.
No problem. We can get you the
Well, you
details
didn't
of
know I was
it.
going to put you to work, did you?
Okay, so if you have a question and a hand up, then I will try to make my way
Well, there
to
was one, I'm
you.
sorry, there was this nice young lady right here. Had her
Oh,
hand up
sorry,
first.
I saw
get to
one
y'all
hand
too.
over there.
That's
We'll
okay.
try to keep moving through.
Hi, I'm Jayla Jackson. I'm a first-year student from Atlanta, Georgia. I first want to start off by, again, thanking you.
You're from Atlanta, Georgia?
Yes.
Wonderful. You guys have it all locked in right there, right? No issues in elections in Georgia.
Okay.
Go ahead. I have another question, please.
But yeah, so I want to first start by, again, thanking you on behalf of our department and everyone here. We're super honored, and thank you for taking time out of your day to be here. 2 questions, but they're kind of, interrelated to each other. So the first one is about civic faith. That was the first time I ever heard that term. I think it's very interesting. You said that America is measured by our election, and you were encouraging us to think pluralistically.
Mhm.
And you said that not thinking pluralistically, you kind of categorize it as an anti-American sentiment. But statistical plurality doesn't necessarily choose our president. And so a real question that is emerging from our nation is, how do we maintain civic faith. And especially like I've had the pleasure to work in a lot of kind of activist communities
Mhm.
that are most of the time centered around Black people. And so a lot of times there is this conversation of how do we maintain civic faith in a country where an electoral college does exist. And so I'm asking kind of for your perspective around the electoral college. And in my opinion, that seems to be one of the largest roadblocks to people being completely faithful in our government.
Well, I appreciate the question, and I will tell you that if we are anything, we are not static, and we are not constant. Were it so, there would never have been a westward expansion. Were it so, we would never have gotten rid of slavery. We would never have reversed the constitutional prohibition against alcohol. We would never have had women have the right to vote. This nation moves and progresses through time. It's more like liquid than it is solid. And when you look at the long run, the advances and the achievements that we've gained over the years, none of them have been easy. But had we lost faith because that thing was so at that time, and had we doubted ourselves because that thing was so at that time, we would never have advanced. What if folks had said, I'm losing civic faith because women can't vote. I'm done with this place. I'm not going to participate. No fight. Most of you, it looks like there's a majority of women in here. Most of you wouldn't vote. You wouldn't be able to vote. You wouldn't even be here in this room. So, to be fair, losing civic faith because of one elected office and the way that it's selected, and I say this with all respect, that's kind of a cop-out. It's kind of an excuse. We can change that, is what I'm saying. We've changed a lot. We've advanced a lot. And just because we've got this problem over here doesn't mean we can't solve it. To paraphrase the current president of the United States, this is the United States of America. There is nothing that we cannot do if we do not put our mind to it. If we want to get rid of the Electoral College, let's. In fact, there's a multi-state compact that's on the table right now, and it is working its way slowly through the states that would basically say, and legally say, without having to change the Constitution, that all of the states will change their laws that supply enough electoral college votes that whoever wins the popular vote gets all of those electoral college votes, and that becomes the president of the United States of America, bypassing legally that procedure that's established in the Constitution. Those efforts already do exist. But I would challenge sort of the premise a little bit, that that one thing is where people will lose civic faith, because that can change. Civic faith is about the challenge. If you've got what you want, why do you need faith? If the world is the way you want it to be, what do you need faith for? What do you need hope for? What do we need each other for? You've already got it. This is about a struggle. It's always been about a struggle to become that more perfect union, to ensure more rights, more dignity for more people across the entire diaspora of humanity, so that we can all truly be equal in the eyes of not just our maker, but our government. That is, if you believe in a maker. I know, I'm on a university campus. So yes, perfectly legitimate concern. The Electoral College is in and of itself unfair. It was not designed to be fair. There's a lot of stuff in that Constitution that were not designed to be fair. And that's why we've changed it, and that's why we've amended it, and that's why it's in a better place. But I absolutely appreciate that question. It's a great question. And it's a good way for us to understand the notion of civic faith. It is what keeps us moving. It is what binds us, because we know that together we can do more. And that's what our enemies want us to do, break that faith. And we cannot surrender to that. I'm sorry if that sounded a little bit rough, but I wanted to push back on the notion. We got a question right over here in the white shirt. Mr. Theta Chi, he's missing a delta in the middle there, by the way.
I was just gonna ask you because I was a little bit confused on the stop the knock thing that you said. Because isn't the Maricopa County the ones that employ the knockers
No,
and the ones that are giving out the voter registration in like the grocery store, like parking lots, those guys?
oh, well, no, what I'm talking about is stop the knock of the campaigns during the election season. So yes, Maricopa County, Apache County, Navajo County, Santa Cruz County, Pima County, they all do go out and they, in their own special ways, will try to get people involved and registered to vote. What I'm talking about is that knock on the door that you get during those 27 days of early voting, right? When the campaigns come and pester you. And I live in a high voting proclivity area, so they can get a lot of, and it's just constant people knocking on the doors when we do vote a little later than we need to. And when my fiance forgets to turn in her ballot and they keep knocking and knocking and knocking and I get mad at her and stuff like that. It's no big deal. But what I'm talking about is the persuasion campaigns that'll continue to come to your door and try to get that. That's the knock that I'm hoping that we stop. So thank you for that helping clarify. There's a couple right down here.
This one's just a little bit more general. It's more about like the presidential election. How do we get unbiased information? I feel like all of our information is from the media, and it's obviously from certain news stations and people who want you to believe or think a certain way.
Hmm.
And I know you can look up like unbiased places, but I feel like they all have some sort of bias in them. Is there a way for us to like find completely unbiased, like genuinely just like what this person's campaign is built on and like
Nope. That doesn't exist. If you think that there's anywhere in journalism, anywhere in the world of information coming to you that is not biased, nope. The work of citizenry is to be educated, to have discourse, to be engaged, and to make decisions. From the dawn of from before. We go back to Common Sense. The pamphlet that some say started it all was a persuasion piece, right? They're all trying to get you to think the way that they do. We politicians, because I'm a politician, guilty, yes. We want you to think the way that we do because we think we're right. And you get to muddle through all of this stuff. And it's actually kind of fun. I mean, when you think about it, like, what are these guys saying? What are those guys saying? And then you get to say, what do I think? And when I think this way or that way, along with 50% plus one of everybody else, then we get to go that way for the time being, because the pendulum will swing back. So, and I have friends, a lot of friends in the media who will kind of get a little bristly when I'm like, you guys are, and I'll tell them too, like, you guys are just as biased as everybody else. And like, clutch the pearls. No, they are. We all are. You have your opinions, right? We all have your opinions. Right? You like Chaperone? Yeah, I'm so. Okay. You don't know? There's probably somebody in here who's like, oh my God, you don't like Chaperone? We have differences of opinion, right? And that's okay. That's what this society is about. That's why we have elections, right? We kind of, and so to assume for a moment that the media is supposed to tell you exact truth, they might give you a number. X number of people, won the Fulbright scholarship. That number might be correct, and it might be true. And then it'll say, which is a Marxist plot by the global elite to take over the world. I don't know if that's true or not. I don't think it is. Of course, I don't hang around with Fulbright scholars if you haven't figured that out yet. So you got to figure it out. That's the challenge. And it's kind of, if you're nosy like me, then it's kind of fun. Yes, ma'am.
Who or what encouraged you to take this path in your education, like law school and becoming a secretary?
So I told this story not too long ago, and they're like, you're a weirdo. When I was a little kid, little kids are like, what do you want to be? And kids are like, I want to be a fireman. I want to be a policeman. I want to be Superman. I was like, I don't want to be any of those things. I want to be the person who wears a white shirt, that sits in a big leather chair behind a desk, and has somebody bring me a folder with a bunch of papers in it. And I open it up and I read over the papers and I put my name on it. I sign it. And the fact of my signature means something outside of my experience will happen. That was what I imagined that I wanted to be when I grew up. I wanted to have an impact beyond my immediate world. I wanted something to happen. And as I got a little bit older, I realized that probably law school was the path, right? And it was actually after my time in the Marine Corps was when I decided to go to law school. But before I got into the Marine Corps, I had my head up my ass. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I was totally confused. I think I had 7 majors one year when I was here at ASU. Yeah, do they let you guys do that anymore? I was changing majors as much as some people were changing underwear. It was a lot. Trust me, I lived in Palo Verde West. Some people never change their underwears. So I actually, I'll tell you guys this story. I left ASU because I drank my way out of a full ride scholarship. I was the first Honeywell College of Education scholar, along with a young woman whose name escapes me right now. And we were supposed to buy like these bright shining stars in the College of Education. And I just partied too hard, Sun Devils. You know it, you've seen it. I was it. I was that guy. And I lost my scholarship and I had to get a job. And I got hired as a counselor at a high school in Cornville, Arizona. There is a Cornville in Arizona. Does everybody know that? Nobody used to know. It's like fancy now. And about halfway through the school year, I realized that I wasn't going to get hired in the summer. I mean, I was like month by month. And so I decided I needed to do something with myself. And so I enlisted in the United States Marine Corps, which is a whole separate story. And when I got out of the Marine Corps, I then made sure that I got back here to finish what I started, because the Marine Corps helped me to uninsert my head from my tail end. And I ended up graduating summa cum laude from the Honors College. And then I went to the University of Denver for law school. And I went prosecuted for a while, spent many years doing criminal defense in the city level, state level, and then the federal district court level. And I've had several arguments in front of the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals in San Francisco, California. And the reason that I'm telling you guys this story is because some of you are going to experience challenges like I did. Some of you are going to, I'm just going to say it, some of you are going to fuck it up pretty bad. But I want you to see that the Secretary of State, the 21st and only ever 21st Secretary of State of Arizona, has traveled that road and was able to lift himself back up through a lot of blood, sweat, and tears and a ton of student loans, and go to law school and stand before you as a guy who is recognized nationally as one of the people who is fighting to save the very foundation of what makes the United States of America actually be. Whatever challenges you guys are going to end up facing, and thank you for giving me an opportunity to preach a little bit here. Whatever challenges you are facing, you can and will overcome them, whether they're personal, whether they're social, whether they're financial. Y'all, don't ever pretend like it's over. It ain't. Take it from a guy who was dunzo here. And I came back, and again, I graduated summa cum laude from the Honors College. I went to law school. I had a great career. I got into politics. I won. I lost. I won again. Life is an absolutely delicious meal. It's multi-course. And you might be allergic to one of the ingredients in one of the courses. It'll happen, right? Just stick with it. I don't even know if I answered your question, but thanks for the chance. Yes, ma'am. Microphone over here. Oh, okay, over here. Sorry, we'll come back.
Sorry about that.
It's okay.
I have 2 questions. How do you work with tribal governments to help facilitate voting access in reservation communities? I remember you mentioning that you helped rural communities gain internet access. How does that expand to working with tribal governments? And for the second question, you've talked a lot about faith, and I want to ask, like, how do you think we can refortify the public's faith in our voting and our political system in general?
To your first question, we've got tribal government liaison in the Secretary of State's office, that the office has in the past operated under a consent decree that mandated that we cooperate with the Navajo and the Hopi nations up in the north and northeast part of the state. We are not under that consent decree as an office anymore. This way predates my administration. But we have maintained that liaison position, and the folks who actually have filled it have maintained a lot of that connectivity. I meet, or my staff counsel often meet with Navajo DOJ, the Department of Justice up on the Navajo Nation. We work very closely with election administrators in Coconino, Navajo, and Apache counties, which is where the territory of the Navajo Nation and the Hopi Nation exist. We go to ITCA, the Intertribal Council of Arizona. We go to ITCA meetings. We sit and we listen to folks from the 22 tribes, tribal nations in Arizona. And we do our level best to be a good liaison between them and the county governments that their territory pertains to. It's not always easy, right? And there are cultural challenges sometimes. There are bureaucratic challenges because they are sovereign nations and deserve the space and the respect of their sovereignty. And so, but we're the ones that run these kinds of elections. They also run their own elections, by the way. For those of you that don't know, tribal nations have their own governments. They run their own elections. And they don't always happen at the same times that ours do. Now, one of the things that happened was when they changed the primary this year from August whatever to July 30th, Navajo had to change their primary date too. Like their tribal council had to convene and change their date. They almost missed their own deadline because of what the legislature and the governor did, which was fine. And we had been communicating with them. It could be a challenge sometimes, but it's really gratifying, right? Because we have a very unique space that we occupy in that relationship, particularly here in Arizona. I mean, I think we've got more tribal nations, I believe, than any other state does. And particularly by land mass, tribal nations occupy more of a percentage of land in Arizona than in any other state. So it's a really unique experience here. And I'm personally happy to do it. My great grandfather, interesting story, and I don't claim a lot in my own heritage because I'm not culturally connected as well as I wasn't raised to be culturally connected as much as I like. My dad's grandfather, so my great grandfather, the story goes, had to learn how to speak some Yaqui before he could marry my great grandmother. Her father insisted. And back in those days, that was like her dad said it, that had to go, right? 16 kids later, there were a lot of Fonteses in Southern Arizona, y'all. This is, so I take a little bit of pride in that. But I think we have a duty in this office, particularly because I owe that to all Arizonan voters, all eligible Arizona voters, and all residents too. I mean, if you're here, you're contributing, right? So we try to make sure that when we are making up rules, when we're, or I should say, defining rules based in statute, when we're taking care of updating systems, when we're doing any of that stuff, we try to communicate as clearly as possible and as early as possible in the process with our tribal nations. In fact, interestingly, we're providing language assistance, and we just finished doing ballots in not just English and Spanish, which are 203, Section 203 of the Voting Act. Don't worry, you don't have to worry about that. But we now have ballots in Arizona in Diné, the Navajo language, in Hopi, and in Apache. And the Apache is, and I don't know if the Hopi is mandated except for one county, but we have the capacity to do that now, and we're really excited about the outreach that we've done. So it's challenging but rewarding. So we like to make sure that we get that stuff taken care of. All right, we've just got a couple more. Where's the microphone?
I have the microphone, but we have an online question. It's from one of your colleagues from your other class, so I think you should take this one first. Thinking about Latino politics and leadership, do you think Puerto Rico and the District of Columbia should become states? What are your predictions about this if Harris wins the election?
I will get to that question, but I didn't answer the second part of her question over here. And that was about how we renew faith. And that was the note that I took. How do we renew faith? We renew faith by not putting up with the bullshit from the people that want to divide us, calling them out. If somebody wants to threaten an election worker, if somebody wants to threaten an election official, if somebody wants to yell at our voters, especially threats and violence, you call them domestic terrorists because that's what they are. You just say it. The definition of terrorism is a threat or an act of violence in order to gain a political outcome. If you're acting like a domestic terrorist, I'm going to call you a domestic terrorist. That's how we renew faith in our systems. By calling out the liars, by calling out the people who would commit violence, and by identifying them clearly for what they are. You see somebody who's being a racist, call them a racist. Watch how upset they get. There's all kinds of pearl clutch. Oh my God, I'm not being a racist. Really? Then what was that? We don't need that kind of nonsense. We don't need that kind of nonsense, which leads into the next question about DC and Puerto Rico statehood. Guess who makes up the majority of people in DC? Black Americans. And guess who makes up the majority of the American citizens who live in Puerto Rico? Puerto Rican Americans, of course. I mean, it's Puerto Rico, right? And some people say, oh, no, it's just for political reasons that we don't want them. Because you'll have 2 more senators in DC who are Democrats, and you'll have 2 more senators in Puerto Rico who are Democrats. And that's just going to tip the scales politically. And I'm like, okay, talk to me about Wyoming. They have more cows than people in Wyoming. And they have just as many senators as California. Right? Talk about tipping scales. Do I think DC and Puerto Rico will have a shot at statehood under a potential Harris administration? I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen. I genuinely don't know what's going to happen. You know, we can guess and we can surmise. Do I think it's a good idea? I think it's a bad idea when there are Americans in this country who get taxed without representation. That's why we built this frigging country in the first place. And don't tell me that people in DC and Puerto Rico don't pay taxes. They do. And they don't have representation. And that's just not fair. And if we're looking at that question and that question alone, then there we go. I'm going to take this young gentleman over here before I wrap.
Okay, so here's the problem. We have students that are going to be rushing in here for the next class that's coming up because they're 2:45 is coming up on us. So colleagues, if you want to see Secretary Fontes, I think he'll stay around for a couple of minutes. We'll move him out of this
Thank you, everybody.
space.
Really appreciate it.
Thank you. Give him a round of applause, please.
very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, everybody. This is so cool.